Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, brought to you from the last day of our GCN event over at Theis. There's Dan Lloyd over there, look. You see that? Lloydie. Coming up this week, I answer your questions on squealing disc brakes, tubeless emergencies, single front ring setups, and disc brake calibration. First up is a question from Larry Theis, who's struggling with squealing discs on his giant Defy. Now, Larry, sorry you're having this trouble. Squealing discs, it could be one of three things. First off, it could be a contamination issue on the pads or the rotor. It could be vibration, and it also could be your setup. And I recommend doing the same protocol for all three issues. And that would be completely strip the caliper down from the bike. So remove the pads, take the caliper off the bike, the spacer that's on there as well, and then remove the rotor, and then give everything a really good clean. And then using a little bit of copper paste on the contact patches that don't move, reapply everything and make sure everything's nice and square, and torque everything right up to the manufacturer's recommended torque settings, and that should help eliminate your issues. Good luck, and hopefully this will actually finally cure your problem. Next up is Kelly S, who has written in with, what is the appropriate way to remove the bearing retaining clips from a BB30 bottom bracket shell? Wants to replace it with a one-piece unit. Now, I'm imagining you've got something similar to what's on the screen now, which means you don't actually have the bearing circlip in there, which would take a circlip plier. So in that case, you're going to use two flat bladed screwdrivers. Hold one blade up against the flat end of the circlip, and then with the other blade of the other screwdriver under the wedged end, try and prise that up and out of your frame. Be really careful not to damage the inside of your frame, but with a little bit of practice and gentle wriggling around in there, you should remove it with not too much trouble at all. Good luck and take your time. Jojo Feliciano, big fan of John's by the looks of it, writes in with a question about going to 1x up front. Running an 1134 in the rear really uses the big 50 tooth ring, so why not just remove it? And of course, why wouldn't you just remove it? Your bike would be lighter and look a little bit sleeker as well. And if you weren't using it anyway, you're not going to be missing out. Start off by removing the big ring, and then check that your chaining bolts are actually not too long. They were of course designed to fit two chain rings in there, and you might find that you either need to run a washer over the collar of the chaining bolt, or just replace them with shorter chaining bolts that are designed for a 1x setup. If you are then going to be moving that front ring to the outside, you might also want to consider running a specific narrow wide ring. These have been designed to retain the chain on the chain ring, prevent any drops that you don't really want to happen. I also recommend actually leaving your front mech on there as well. That adds a little bit extra security. You can use the screws to adjust it to the correct position, but definitely remove the cable for making it look a little bit neater. Barry Enston up next with a question about tubeless. Is it better to take a spare tyre and CO2 to seat it rather than an inner tube? I recommend absolutely taking an inner tube. It's actually quite hard to carry a big bulky tyre out on the road with you, and then you're going to need to carry sealant as well, and all those CO2 cartridges. And you never know with tubeless, sometimes you can have a particularly difficult setup, so you might end up snapping tyre levers trying to get the tyre on. It's just a lot easier to stick with what you've already got and just throw an inner tube on there. And then when you get back home, you can set up a new tyre tubeless the next time you're ready to go out. The next question is from Yossa McKenney, who's interested in going bike packing on his new gravel bike. The gearing is a 4832 with an 1134 at the rear, Ultegra RX rear mech, so you don't get all that chain slap because of the clutch mechanism. The rear mech's capacity is listed as 39 teeth and a max low sprocket of 34. Could he add water tooth derailleur hanger extender to get a larger cassette fitted? Well, yes, of course you can. On their website, they've got all the recommendations for what size and what size extender that you actually need. So some of them are actually really tiny, they barely extend it at all, but others are 2 to 3 times the length, and you can use those. You do have to be careful though, and they even say this on their website, that actually it's never going to be quite as smooth as the shifting would have been had you used the manufacturer's original one. So you have to really question, do you need that extra gearing? If you think you can get away with the gearing you've already got using the standard mech with no extender, I actually recommend doing that. If you do decide to go down the extender route and you put a bigger cassette on, you might also need to consider putting a new longer chain on there, because of course you're going to have about 6 extra teeth to get the chain around. And that could well be the difference between a snapped rear mech or a nice enjoyable ride. Enjoy the bike packing, sounds like lots of fun. Another question about disc brakes now. This one is from Paul Bertram, who has Shimano 105 hydraulic discs. Size for size, could I easily upgrade the discs to Ultegra or Dura-Ace without any other changes? And absolutely you can. You will probably have to realign your caliper just to make sure that everything is indeed running nice and true. It's just a sensible thing to do. And if you are putting new rotors on, then you should also consider putting new pads on, just so that they bed in together. You've got a nice brand new setup working there. But it's a great way to try and save a little bit of weight, or just change the look of your bike, because all the rotors do look slightly different. Enjoy. Right, my favourite question of the week. This one goes to Roger Furness. I'm sorry you don't actually win a prize, it's just my favourite question because I'm a complete nerd when it comes to this topic. Roger has power meters on his bikes which he calibrates before riding. When stopping for coffee, the power meters sleep and the Garmin Edge 1000 stays on. Should he recalibrate the power meters when they wake up again? Now, I've written a really in-depth answer, so I'm going to refer to the screen every now and again to make sure that you get all the information that I put on the screen, because I am a nerd and I really enjoy this sort of subject. So, over the years, the topic you brought up has been a great discussion on all sorts of forums. And 15 years ago, when power meters were quite new, you had to really stay on top of those calibrations because there was a lot of drift. Except we're not actually talking about calibration, we're talking about a zero offset. I don't know why it doesn't say it on the screens of computer head units, but it's like using the tare function on your kitchen scale. Imagine you put a weight on your kitchen scale, so a bag of flour or something, then you press tare, it goes back to 0. This is exactly what's happening when you're doing the zero offset on your power meter, or at least as close as. A calibration is when you hang a set of known weights from your crank, measure the zero offset, and then input that data into an online calculator. You can do the calculations at home, but I can't remember the exact protocol for that. So I looked it up on the internet on cyclingpowerlab.com/powermetercalibration.aspx. And Dan and I were having a little discussion about this, Dan Lloyd and I, the other day. He used to love doing this as well. He has a set of known weights that he had weighed at his local delivery office, something like that, where you get a stamp of the weight on there, because it's really important to have the exact number to, I think, 4 decimal places, which is quite far. So then you start off by putting your cranks dead level, and you take 3 measurements weighted and 3 measurements unweighted from each crank arm, so both in the 3 o'clock position as it's on the bike. And then you input this onto the online calculator and you'll come back with what is known as the slope of your power meter. And this is a great way of checking, is your power meter still functioning correctly? If it's not, after you've done this, you can then send it off to a service center and make sure everything's back in check. Going back to your zero offset question, I thoroughly recommend doing it on every ride because it gives you this little glimpse into the health of your power meter. If you were to see massive fluctuations from day to day, despite not traveling anywhere, then you would know that something was going wrong with your power meter. Generally these days, they are much more stable than they used to be, and you should have no worries whatsoever. Let me know if you do go through this really nerdy route of trying to calibrate it yourself, because I'll be quite curious to see how you found it. Right, that's it for this week's Tech Clinic. If you do have a question you'd like answered, drop it in the comments below using the hashtag AskGCNTech, and you can do that over on Twitter as well. If you want another video to watch right now, click on the screen there.